Story 1. The Cabin's Eyes. I booked the cabin because the listing had bad photos. Not bad as in ugly. The shots were crisp, bright, staged to within an inch of their lives, but every one was framed too carefully. The lens never strayed high enough to show the rafters, or low enough to show under the couch, or far enough into the shadow beyond the hall. The listing had that manicured neatness that makes you want to smudge it, if only to see what's hiding underneath. I told myself I was going up there for a digital detox weekend, no comments, no metrics, just quiet. But part of me wanted to film it, to come back with a story. People love cabin horror. Claustrophobic isolation plus survival. It's easy content. You set up a mic in a pool of lamplight. You speak into the dark. The cabin sat bony and alone at the end of a plowed track. The sign by the road read, Pine Saddle, with letters punched through tin. Snow lay in folded sheets around the foundation. Needles collected in mats where the wind couldn't reach, and the trees leaned closer than was polite. When I cut the engine, the quiet rushed in. Too big for the shape of the car. I could almost hear the sky. Inside, cedar walls, 2 rooms, and the smell of someone else's soap. A stone fireplace with ash like gray pollen. A pine table gouged by old knives. The Wi-Fi password on a chalkboard in a cursive so tidy it felt scolding. There was a laminated sheet on the counter with check-in instructions and a logo I didn't recognize. Mother Lark Cabins, plus a section titled Security and Comfort. It talked about a smart monitoring system for your peace of lark mind. A small black dome blinked from the corner above the entryway. Another above the mantel. One perched like a pupil between the kitchen and the hall. I told myself I was fine with it. Everyone had cameras now. Elegantly invasive little eyes that promised safety and gave you a polite version of paranoia instead. When I turned on the lamp, the dome above the fireplace winked awake, and a soft chime sounded from the chalkboard, actually a wall-mounted tablet running a home app. A neutral voice said, "Welcome back." "Not back," I answered. First time. The tablet screen showed a floor plan of the cabin. Blue shapes in the living room. A rectangle labeled, Camera Great Room. One in the kitchen. One on the porch. The bedroom tile was gray, with a padlock icon. Below that, facial recognition toggled on. Known profiles. Owner, caretaker, guest, I muttered. Right. I unpacked, made a small dinner, and ate it leaning on the counter. The windows turned to mirrors as the forest pooled into them. Snow started again while I wasn't looking, so soft it made the porch light seem dusty. I messaged 2 friends to let them know I'd arrived. Signal flickered and then caught. The screen stuttered in this place, as if it thought the air was thicker here. At 10, I dragged the chair up to the fire and read until the words blurred and the sentences sounded like sleep. It was a clean, muffled quiet, the kind where every creak is huge because it's the only movement in a cathedral. I turned off the lamps one by one so I'd remember where everything was in the dark. The tablet chimed. I told myself it was happy background noise like a fish tank pump, but I still went and looked. The screen read, "Movement detected." It showed a live feed. The beam of light, the white fall of snow, the night making a wall of itself just beyond the railing. The porch was empty, except for the drift building against the door. "Wind," I said. "Snow." I backed away. The chime came again. "Movement detected." The live view showed the empty living room, my own chair by the fire. Its shadow like a waiting man. The fire licked and settled. The image stuttered once, which was enough to jar the brain into seeing a shape that wasn't there. When it steadied, the chair was just a chair. Relax, I told myself, without relaxing. The third chime was quieter, more like a coin, landing on felt. Person detected. Bedroom. The tile was gray. I tapped it. A prompt asked for an admin code. "I'm the guest," I said, like I could hear the apology in my voice. No access. I turned and stood in the hall. The bedroom door was closed, because I'd closed it. I'd closed it without thinking as I put down my bag. I did not remember locking it. The knob reflected the lamp in a tiny coin of light. "System bug," I said. The 4th chime overlapped the 3rd. Person detected. Then immediately, sleep, monitoring active. My skin went cold in the shallowest way, like a draft across a cup. I tapped the gray tile again and it prompted me again. Admin only. I touched the door. It was cool, and very faintly, I could feel that the air behind it was warmer than the hall. I opened it. The bedroom was small and tidy, with a woven rug and a bed made with hospital corners. A window looking out into the black. No camera on the ceiling, not in the corners. I checked the vents and the smoke detector and the lampshade. Nothing but dust and the smell of cedar. I left the door open after that. I went back to the fire, sat, and stared at the tablet until my eyes watered. No more chimes came. Eventually I slept. You don't remember the act, only that you are on the far side of it, that you crossed into a place where the things in your life keep shining behind your closed lids like picture frames. The morning was ordinary. Bright, blue, fake looking. The forest was a corral of green teeth around the cabin. Coffee tasted like something you earn. I dried the cup and set it on the rack upside down to keep the cabin's clean story going. When I looked at the tablet, it showed 3 notifications. Overnight person detection, X, 3/2/13/3/41, AM, recorded. I opened the app. I expected redaction. I expected a demand for the code, but the gray tile for the bedroom had turned blue. I tapped. The playback scrubber scrolled across a bed as pristine as a staged listing. Time-stamped, 2:13 a.m. Exposure grain dancing like static. The bed looked empty. The covers were undisturbed. In the far corner, just where the doorframe cut off sight, there was a wedge of darker dark. I dragged the timeline forward. The image jumped. The static speckle smeared and cleared. The wedge in the corner leaned a fraction. A shadow pulled tighter. My thumb stopped. The bed covers were creased. Just a little, a small dent where a knee might have pressed down on invisible fabric. I rewinded. The crease wasn't there. Then it was. Then it smoothed itself once, like someone shifting their weight. I told myself cameras do this. They breathe. They adjust to low light. They make the world from numbers, and sometimes the world ghosts around the edges, trying on shapes like costumes. I texted the host number from the laminated sheet. Hey, the bedroom feed unlocked. It shows person detection overnight. Can you check if the camera's mislabeling from another room? The bubble turned to delivered, a long, polite minute later. The reply came an hour after that and felt like it had been written a month ago. Hi there. No cameras in private areas. The system may indicate occupancy based on thermal. If you have any issues, please don't hesitate to. It cut off as if it were embarrassed by its own script. Thermal, occupancy. I turned the word until the morning light and revealed different meanings. Not person, not an intruder, just heat. The leftover shape of me sleeping. Except I hadn't slept in the bedroom. I'd fallen asleep in the chair and woken with my face printed by the knit of the throw pillow. My neck was the stiff hinge of a gate. The bedroom bed was still made perfect when I checked it. I told myself not to feed it. The system had a story and it wanted me to fit inside it. I went for a walk anyway, because the snow was crisp and the air felt like an argument I could win. The trees crowded the path without touching it. My footsteps sounded like paper tearing. Far away, a woodpecker made a sound like a clock, swallowed a bird. Lonely places always feel like they're in the middle of conversations when you arrive. When I came back, the porch camera had caught me. A rectangle around my body, yellow text at the bottom. Person. Guess 95% confidence. The way it guessed at me felt like an insult and a compliment at once. The tablet had a new tab, labeled Faces. It showed my photo frame, pulled from the porch angle. Underneath, guest. The profile for owner was blanked out. A placeholder silhouette, like you see on login screens. Caretaker showed a face I didn't know. An older man with cheeks like dried apples and eyes that were too light. The tablet chimed as if reacting to my glance. Data sync complete. It showed 2 new ticks under my face. Inside detections, 0. Sleep detections, 1. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and looked until the day started to shorten and everything became the color of a fruit bruising. I could say I was trying to be rational. Really, I was trying to be the person who leaves when the story asks them to stay. Night sits down fast in winter. 1 minute, you are lying on the couch watching your breath not show in the air because you forgot the heat again, and the next minute, you are in a different place without movement to explain the switch. I lit the fire earlier that second night, not because I needed the warmth, but because the light felt like a boundary I could draw. I set my phone on the coffee table and opened the app for the cabin system. It let me set alerts. It let me reduce sensitivity. It let me choose never notify for bedroom, but the toggle slid back and refused, as if it was bored with the idea. My phone's lock screen pulsed with the frost blue light of that app anyway. Every time it did, my ribs seemed to make more space. At 11:32, movement detected. Great room. I already knew it would say that because I just stood up to add a log. The live feed showed my back, head tilted, my hands in a posture of prayer around the wood. My face, when I set the log and turned, looked like someone I'd seen in a crime show reenactment. Too much shadow under the eyes. The box drew around me and labeled me again. Guessed, 94%. As if doubt could climb or fall. At 11:37, movement detected. The porch was empty, but now not in the casual way of an empty thing, more in the stiff way of something that had just been used. The snow around the mat had a new shape in it, a round impression like a knee. My mind did what minds do. Knee. Someone knelt to look under the door. And then, no wind sculpted it. Wind is lazy, but it gets there. Snow drifts. At 12:04, person detected bedroom. I stared at the locked gray tile and said out loud, "You're wrong." The lights in the cabin went soft for a half second, like they were breathing out. The generator didn't hiccup because there wasn't one. There was only a little metal box on the side of the cabin that the laminated sheet had called a backup battery. Electricity moved through the air differently here. Everything felt treated. My chest learned to hold breath for longer. I told myself to sleep. I left the bedroom door open again and the hall lamp on, because I have my superstitions like anyone else. I lay in the bed despite the app, because I wanted the numbers to line up, irrationally, like aligning silverware before a guest arrives. I told myself not to look at the door, not to look at the corner of the door where anything can stand, and you still say, "No, nothing there. I'll just shut it. If I shut it, then nothing will be there on the other side." Sleep came the way a coat goes over your shoulders, the kind that leaves your hands out of the sleeves. I woke up twice to the tiny sounds of a building settling into the cold. Once I woke because a plank somewhere made a hollow, taut sound like a guitar string being tuned. That one I didn't like. Sound like that has intention. It's the sound of something being readied. I turned on my side and pulled the covers until my face had a roof. Later, whatever later was, time loses neat edges. At night, the tablet chimed in the other room and gave me a reason to hate it. I lay there and counted my own heartbeat the way a person might count steps in a stairwell as they fall. When morning finally happened, it was harsh and yellow and made me feel like I'd cheated it somehow. The bed was no longer perfect. That was my doing. I moved my legs into the crease that wasn't there and left a real one. My phone had 3 new alerts I had missed with the volume low. Person detected bedroom X. 4. Timestamps. 112, 123, 21, 358. I didn't open them right away. I made coffee. I heard the click of the mug on the counter and it sounded too loud. When you spend enough time away from other people, you start announcing yourself to objects. Here I am. It's just me. I tapped the first clip when I couldn't wait anymore. The bedroom camera, wherever it was, showed the bed and a triangle of wall. The feed had the distant fogginess of a shot taken through 2 panes of glass. Sleep monitoring. Active. A label read. Heart rate. Unavailable. Breath rate. Unavailable. Present low confidence. I watched the clip 3 times, looking for the human. On the 3rd time I realized the shadow at the edge of the bed, the long narrow piece of darker tone that I'd been letting my eyes slide past, was both too straight and too irregular in the wrong places, like a shadow that didn't match anything visible in the room. When I paused and back and forthed the slider, the shadow widened and narrowed in 3 distinct pulses, the way someone's lungs make shape of air. I felt the distance between me and the door to the living room as a series of measurable units. I walked into that room very carefully, because small movements seem more useful than large ones when something else might be listening. The Faces tab pulsed. Under my picture, a new line had appeared. Inside detections. 1. Sleep detections. 5. Under caretaker, the new line read, Inside detections. 2. I looked at the porch feed because my brain wanted a bridge made of reason. Snow preserves insult. The porch showed a disturbed, mossy pattern where the mat had been, but the mat was still there. Snow on the steps had that smooth look, like a hand had pressed it. Beyond the steps, the yard was approximately the front of every horror video you've ever scrolled past. Nothing happening, except that you know it has already happened. I messaged the host again. The caretaker's profile populated last night. It says Inside Detections. Are you running tests? A while later, the reply, Sorry about any notifications. The system learns as it goes. Please trust that private areas are never recorded. If you're concerned, we can disable the feature remotely. Would you like us to? My hand hovered over the yes because sure, turn off the thing telling you something is wrong so the wrong thing can go back to being just a rumor you dress in daylight. I typed, disable it. Before I could hit send, the tablet chimed in a tone I hadn't heard yet, a little brighter than the rest. New profile created. Home. The face was not a face. It was a negative, an absence shaped like a person standing not quite in the field of the camera. It was a space where texture stopped, where the pixels forgot their noise. Under the shape, the name was blank for a second, and then a word slid into the slot like a drawer going home. Owner. I closed my eyes. Because that is what you do when someone tells you you are not in your own body. When something invisible claims the room you sleep in as something it owns. The weather turned. I could feel it in the way the cabin's skin sounded. The wind had teeth now. It skittered ice at the windows. Midday wore the look of 4 o'clock. I paced trails between the chair and the window and the tablet, as if my body could do something the app couldn't. I told myself I would leave in the morning, because leaving at night is how you end up turning into a story someone else tells. People in comments, brave from couches, would call me a coward for waiting. Let them. Cowardice is a word people use when they've never met a certain shape of fear. The third night came like a shadow thrown from very far away. I left the lamps on against it. I put my phone on the table, screen up. I stopped looking at the tablet except when it rang an alarm too loud to ignore. I made rules. Small ones. Don't say its name if it gives itself a name. Don't answer the door for anyone who knocks without a car on the track. Don't look long into the bedroom door's corner if something there looks like it plans to keep looking back. At 10:19, person detected. Great room. It was me. I was a person. That seemed impossible enough to be reassuring. At 11:03, person detected. The porch was a white sheet. The feet stuttered. For 1 second, the lens flashed salt and pepper, and behind the railing, between the posts, the forest seemed to move the way an animal's skin moves under a fly, and then it was still. At 11:40, sleep, monitoring, active. The bedroom tile had stopped locking itself. It played the feed without asking, as if I'd earned it. 2 seconds into the clip, something leaned in front of the lens. Not a face. Not anything I could name without making it real. It was textured like wood that had been underwater a long time. Dark, with pale striations that stood up like wet hair against the comb. When it moved, the picture made a sound. Not the house, the picture. Pressed, flexing. The lens had a voice, like a throat. I said, into the room. I'm leaving. I packed badly. Things loud with zippers. The night became a place with too many surfaces. I put my back to the wall because animals know better than to stand in the center of any open thing. I heard the wind in the trees change from running to speaking. Yes, I know what that sounds like. If you've been in the woods alone, you've heard how it changes. It begins to try on phrasing. It starts to imitate mouth. As I crossed to the door, the tablet chimed in the bright tone again. Profile updated. Home owner, high confidence. The gray new name next to the shapeless shape brightened like a newborn star. The silhouette on my own face in the Faces tab dimmed to a transparency. Guessed, 50%. The caretaker's line flickered and went to 0, like a heartbeat monitor, finally understanding there's been no pulse for a long time. I pulled the door, and it did not open. Even the best designed cabins warp a little in winter, but this was not that. This was like the house's muscle held itself. When I tried again harder, the latch moved and the door swung and the porch lay there, white and flat and blind. Snow was blowing sideways in a film of ice dust. My tracks from earlier were gone, as if my body had never been. The porch camera showed the same thing, but in the delay that live video gives you, in that half second that proves we are never seeing any moment exactly as it is, I noticed on the screen the snow caught a shape that was not caught in the real world. On the screen, the drift at the edge had an indentation, like someone leaning their hands on the rail, knuckles down. I whispered, "Please," and hated that I said it. The wind answered in a different voice. I knew it wasn't a voice. I knew the cabin had angles that trapped sound and gave it back in weird pieces. I knew, but all the knowing in the world cannot change the way your lungs know when you're prey. The whisper came through the seams of the windows, the keyhole, the microscopic spaces where cold makes itself into a draft. It pressed against my ear in a cluster. The words were almost my words. They were almost the sentence I just said. They said, "Please." I slammed the door and slid the deadbolt the way you place a palm on a wound. The tablet chimed politely. Door locked. The bedroom tile pulsed. Person detected. The feed opened on its own. The bed was empty. Neat again. The air at the far edge of the frame twisted once, like heat above a road. The twist moved in the slow way of something that has all the time in the world. It slid down the wall and across the rug and took the shape of something sitting on the mattress edge. I saw the mattress dip for real in the other room, not just on screen. The dip matched the depth of a person who weighs what I weigh. I wanted to throw the tablet. I wanted to leave it in the snow to have its mutable conversation with the weather. Instead, I set it on the mantel very carefully, like a dangerous plate. I did the only thing left that felt like making a line. I pulled the couch up against the bedroom doorway. It was heavy. The legs grumped on the rug. I put the pine table on its side and wedged it like a gate. The cabin wasn't large, and the furniture looked uglier when it wasn't in its staging pose. The room looked like a busted set. I kept thinking of how the listing had framed everything so carefully, like someone making sure their eyes looked soft in a photo. At 151, movement detected. I haven't B8s. The box drew itself around the couch, around the table, then around nothing at all. The app put a glowing rectangle where no shape stood. It held it for 3 beats, as if waiting for the person to notice they were being looked at. The label under that empty rectangle read, Owner, 100%. After that, the cabin stopped pretending it was in my world. The fire sank and made a hollow sound like a breath reversed. The air in the great room got harder to push in and out. I heard a footstep above me where there was no floor. I heard a nail somewhere cry out as if turning. The tablet went dim. When it brightened, the floor plan had changed. The rectangle of the bedroom grew longer by a few feet. The hall shortened. A new space budded at the back like a cancer. It didn't have a label. The camera's blue dots reoriented themselves to look into that new cavity. The bedroom tile wasn't gray or blue anymore, just a color I could not name immediately. This color was wet stone and old teeth. I didn't have new rules to make. So, I did something stupid. I decided to speak to it. Not because I wanted an answer, but because stories need voices, and I needed to hear mine. I said, with the politeness you use with a stranger who might hurt you, I'm leaving in the morning. You can have your house. You can have everything in it. The wind answered my exact sentence back to me through the door's keyhole. The bedroom feed showed the bed smooth itself, slow and considerate. The pillow rose a fraction like something lifted its head to hear me better. The white blur of snow reflection on the window glass shivered as if a hand had blanked the glass and then let it go. I didn't lie to myself. I knew I was going to stay up until the light. I knew I would count the hours as if counting them might prove they still added to 24. Something knocked then, not on the door, on the wall of the bedroom, from the inside. 3 taps in a polite rhythm that was worse than a bang. I thought of the word caretaker and wanted to laugh or throw up. I thought of the caretaker's face blurred into a grayscale existence by the app. I thought about how old cabins have spaces, and those spaces get new ideas if left too long. I dragged the chair up to the fire and sat with my back curved so I could see the hall. You can't see everything, but you can see everything facing you, and something in your bones believes facing matters. The hall stayed as it was. The couch stayed agate. My phone decided it wanted to comfort me, and started digging out photos from last year, sending me a montage of my own ordinary face in ordinary places. For a second, I didn't know my face. For a second, I thought the guy in those photos looked like the kind of nice, stupid person who believes a place becomes yours if you pay for it. When the light finally started, a true light, not the hallway lamp, it felt like a noise more than a glow, a clatter of cool metal in the eyes. The wind slowed to a steady, disinterested push. The tablet chimed, like it had only been waiting for permission. Morning summary, it said. Sleep quality, poor. Inside detections, owner 7, guest 0. It took me a few seconds to process that, guest 0, as if I had slept nowhere, as if I had not been in the room at all. I didn't pack. That had been done. I put on my coat and hat. I pocketed the keys. The deadbolt turned easily. The door swung open like a mouth. The porch lay under a smooth skin of new snow, unmarked, except for the places where it wasn't. There were 2 prints by the threshold, small depressions like someone's toes had pressed there to listen. Beyond that, nothing. The steps were a pane of ice that took me carefully. I didn't look back. Not until I reached the far bend of the track where the road curls behind a tall stand of pine and you have to line up the car exactly or the plow takes you. I glanced at the cabin then, because people always glance. It looked like a face in a crowd that you think is someone you know, and then you realize no, it only has that expression of being looked at. The tablet chimed on the passenger seat. I had taken it because the last rule I'd made without admitting it was, take its eyes so it can't follow. Take the thing that insists on naming. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof later. Maybe I wanted to bring my cage with me so I could tell myself I'd escaped it. New profile created. It said, the icon was a small house. The name field filled one letter at a time with slow, awful finickiness. The green dots twitched as if they were nerves being tested. Home away. Under the new profile, there were two labels. Owner, inside. Guest, outside. The road dropped, then climbed. Snow filed away even the groove of my tires. The app's map showed the cabin shrinking behind me, the camera's field of view narrowing until they were blue pinpricks. The tile for the bedroom was dark again, the padlock drawn in a little smug line. The feed icons grayed out one by one. The only tile left active was a new one that had not been there before, one that represented nowhere, a blank shape hovering in the corner of the plan like a thought. It said, simply, listening. I threw the tablet onto the back seat as if I could put it farther away without stopping. It hit the upholstery, screen first, and slid. Its chime sounded once more as if from inside the fabric, muffled and patient. The trees on either side of the road stood in assembly. They did not speak, not out loud, but the air in the car had the place of a voice readying itself. It felt like being a sentence about to be read. There is a kind of silence you can carry out of a place. It comes with you. I drove with that kind of silence. By the time service returned, the notifications had stacked themselves into a tall, thin tower on the lock screen. Guest profile updated. Guest location. Outside. Sleep monitoring. Active. My hands flexed on the wheel. I ignored it all until the first intersection with a store and a parking lot and an old guy in a neon beanie pushing a shovel. Then I turned into the lot and stopped with the engine idling like a big animal catching its breath. I got out. I left the door open a fraction so the car wouldn't lock itself. I went to the back seat and pulled the tablet out. It was warm in a way that wasn't consistent with a cold morning. It felt like a pocket held tight in a palm. The screen showed the cabin from above, simplified into pretty shapes so it would be easy to digest. A small dot pulsed in the center of the great room. Owner, at home. My own face, in the Faces tab, had been replaced by a circle with no features. Under it, guest. Confidence. 1%. I didn't think. People always describe their choices as desperate and pure at once. Here's what I did. I walked to the metal trash bin by the store's wall, the one with the sand at the bottom and the cigarette stains like black tears. I lifted the lid. I put the tablet inside. I lowered the lid again in a gentle way that I would be embarrassed to explain. Then I got back into the car and drove away with the bone-chur sensation that the cabin hadn't kept its eyes in there anyway. It was a long drive back into the city where I keep the life I brag about. I did not look into the rearview mirror more than usual. I did not check the lock screen. When I got home, my apartment smelled like oranges and dust. Someone had left me a package on the mat, with a cheery sticker that said delight inside as if it were a threat. I slept for 12 hours, which was either exhaustion or my body performing a ritual. When I woke, my phone had one new notification from an app I didn't recognize, with a palette I did. Mother, Lark Cabins. It read, "Thank you for your stay. Please rate your experience. Did you feel at home?" When I clicked it, it opened a page that briefly showed the blue floor plan before it adjusted to something else. A grid of my own apartment, simplified, prettied, its edges squared off. New tiles appeared, labeled with generous names. Bedroom, living room, kitchen. Great little icons representing cameras that weren't there, bloomed into existence and then dimmed, polite, as if asking permission to come back on. A new profile had already been created, of course. It had my face and the word owner underneath. Something inside me tried to split into explanations obvious, rational, survival-shaped, and bumped into the dull fact that some stories do not end when the car turns around. They exist like houses you carry with you. They exist like a word you said once that won't stop echoing because you said it into the wrong room. This is where I stop. This is where I tell you I was only trying to sleep. This is where I say the cabin's eyes weren't in the cabin. They were always waiting for me to invite them home. Story 2. The Whispering Pines. I didn't go up there to find anything. I went to lose noise. The noise had followed me through the summer, like something with patience. It was a thin, high tone at the back of everything. The kind of sound you only hear when the world goes quiet between songs, in locker rooms after practice, standing at the sink while the microwave counts down and you don't know where to put your hands. Sometimes it was more of a texture than a tone, a pressure in the middle of my head like someone had pressed a cold coin there and forgotten it. The doctor said tinnitus, probably from earbuds and poor decisions. The therapist said anxiety, and gave me a breathing exercise that felt like trying to teach a room to remember what doors are for. Also, my girlfriend and I had just broken up or paused, which is the same thing with a prettier font, so any sound that wasn't the sound of that conversation replaying would have qualified as a blessing. The cabin was cheap because it ran on a generator. The listing had that survivalist chic where they show pan-fried trout in black and white, even though you will eat bagel bites. The photos were all green. Green water, green pines, a green fire pit with moss like velvet on the stones, the kind of saturation that makes you believe the air up there had calories in it. The directions promised a solar battery good for essential use, a backup generator for storm contingencies, and no reliable cell service by design. I said by design out loud in the car to make fun of it, mostly to keep sounds happening. I got there in late afternoon. The sky had a hard blue look, like someone had frozen it wrong. The road was a single vehicle apology, cut through trees that leaned like they were conspiring. The cabin stood on a bare patch of rock above a pond. Close pines pinned it in. It wasn't the kind of cute where they put blankets in baskets. It was the kind where whoever lived here before had believed that things were what they were. A porch, a door with a good lock, narrow windows someone had cut with a practical saw, a rain barrel, a line of wood like vertebrae stacked under the eaves. Inside, one room with a loft, a stove that looked like it ate whatever you fed it, a table made from something that had died before I was born. A battery box hung gently under the counter. The hum had the personality of a fridge in a bad apartment. It calmed me immediately. Proof that electricity was still a thing. Proof that there were systems in place, that the world would keep running the script, where you heat water and steam fogs the glass and you are just a person who makes tea. There were instructions on the wall written on a piece of wood, in a splayed-out hand. Solar battery lights, pump, phone, generator sparingly, night or storms, wind, sounds, equals normal. Pines sing, do not call 911. If voices worry you, hum back. J. I took a photo of that last line and sent it to my friend Arya with, if I die, this is the note. She sent a crying laughing emoji and also a heart because she knows my jokes are not just jokes. I set my stuff down and the room took it in without changing. That's what I liked best. It didn't try to be my place. The pond outside stood very still, like something pretending to be asleep. The pines crowded the water, their reflections making it look like a mouthful of teeth. The generator was a small box on a concrete pad out back, underneath a sloped roof. It had a pull cord and a switch like a lawnmower. I tugged the cord once, just to hear it cough and prove to myself it would. It coughed, and then purred for a second, a different hum, deeper, the sound of a bigger animal waking. I shut it back off. Night or storms, I told it, like we were making a deal. The first hour passed like a tutorial level. I found the bucket to prime the pump at the sink. I cranked it until the water came up cold and iron tasting. I stacked kindling and got a little fire going in the stove for the performance of it, even though the day didn't require heat. I set my phone on airplane because there was nothing for it to hunt anyway, and because the therapist had said that reducing the frantic seeking was a kindness to the part of my brain shaped like a meerkat. I drank the tea and read the note again. If voices worry you, hum back. I didn't hear voices. I heard wind. The pines lean into it and get musical. Everyone says that. It's a low, long sound, like a train crossing a bridge very far away, a breath getting ready to say a word. The pines stood so close that the sound braided itself into a single rope and pulled through the trees with steady force. It was nice. That's all I mean. It was nice to hear something that wasn't machines and people. The noise inside my head thinned to a line. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I could hear it. At dusk, the pond darkened, like someone turned the dimmer down. The sky did that gradient thing that makes you say stupid things like, wow, the sky is doing the gradient thing, even if you're alone. I put a pot on the stove and made pasta and the simplest sauce and sat on the porch steps with the bowl steaming in my hands, watching a cloud of midges forfeit their lifespan to the light. When the darkness arrived, it had momentum. I felt it hit the trees first before it came for the rest of the world. The cabin lights made a yellow island, and I stood on it, and it felt like standing in a circle of salt. I put on a playlist and washed the dishes and promised myself I would not look at the battery percentage more than twice. It said 66%. It sounded like a grade. I stacked a few bigger logs in the stove so it would keep saying there is warmth while I slept. I set my toothbrush on the counter. I solved the small problem with the loft ladder by swearing at it in a way that made me feel like a pioneer. I went to bed with the complete fake confidence of a person who has never slept in a place where the dark feels like a weather system. The loft bed's mattress had the body memory of whoever slept there longest. When I lay down, it negotiated my shape with the generosity of a dog that will let you have the couch, but not all of it. That was when I heard the popping. It was small, irregular. It came from the battery box. Popping, then a longer pause, then a different note like glass thinking about cracking. I sat up and the world made that soft shh sound it makes when your blood stands up too fast. The cabin held its breath like rooms do when you hold yours. Then the light flickered in a way that sent a small animal through my ribs. No, I said, because that is the only word we have for the universe's choices when they fail to align with our plan. I grabbed my phone, and the flashlight lit the wood in a way that made it look like meat. The lights went again off, on, off, and the battery box made a working too hard sound, and the stove's fan whined and then sighed and then became a hole in the air. The playlist on the counter choked and became a whisper of its own, and then shut up. The cabin went from friendly to original in a second. No hum, no safe wash of white noise. A deeper quiet dropped onto everything. It was the loudest quiet I had ever heard. I stood there in that new sound with my silly flashlight, throwing a cone of panic around the room, and I realized that I could hear the pines better now. Not like before where they had been outside the glass, a decorative thing you can point at. Now it felt like they were in the walls, the way the smell of someone's cooking lingers. Physically present, not metaphorical. The sound came through the boards, under the door, in through the window frames. The whole room was a mouth around it. I did what the note said. I went out to the generator. It was full dark now, and my flashlight made the path look like a trap. My breath came out in little nervous clouds that made an idea of person that could easily be mistaken for something else by anything watching. I told myself I was the main thing in the beam. That felt unstable. The generator sat under its sloped roof like a doghouse for a machine that might bite. I pulled the cord. It gave me that single cough again, then caught. The sound of it was ridiculous, coarse, alive, a lawnmower that had learned language and only knew one word. It steadied into a drone that petted the edge of my nerves. The cabin lights winked back on, yellow squares punching through the trees. Back inside, the battery display blinked uncertainly, then settled on 19%. The generator needed to charge it back up. Sparingly, the note had said, but the note didn't feel what I felt, which was the way the dark had been a hand around the house. I lay awake in the loft, listening to the generator's throat and the wind's long sentence. The two sounds made a third, an off-kilter pulse that built an argument in my head and then walked it back as if afraid to finish. The tinnitus thread returned, faint as a hair on the tongue. I named it. Naming it made it mine again, and that helped. When the generator cut out, it was abrupt, like a word was about to be said and then forgotten. I sat up too hard and hit my head on the sloped ceiling. The curse I threw into the world felt undersized. I listened. Nothing from the machine. The battery box did not hum back to life. The lights were already dimming, as if embarrassed that they'd ever tried to make a difference. After a long, unkind pause, the cabin became all wind. The pines had changed. I don't know how else to say it. Before, the sound had been like ocean noise on a short loop. Big, frothed at the edges, anonymous. Now there were breaks in it. Spaces shaped like syllables, a rhythm that repeated. Every time the wind went through the trees, it snagged on a particular phrase, like fabric on a nail. A tone climbed and fell. It made the same little hook. It came back. It came back. My whole body wanted it to be a trick of attention. Your brain is a pattern machine. Give it rain, it will give you beats. Give it static, it will find a chorus you can hum. I lay very still and made another rule. Do not move until you can prove to yourself this is nothing. The wind went through the pines, holding the note long enough to taste it. It broke on the same pause. It did the same hook. and then, just at the end of the long exhale through the needles, something that wasn't wind pushed the last bit of sound into a shape that was almost a word. It sounded like someone whispering through a cheese grater. H-low. I let the rule break itself. I grabbed the flashlight, climbed down, and turned it on the instruction board. The light made the letters look damp. Wine sounds equals normal. Pines sing. Do not call 911. If voices worry you, hum back. Absolutely not, I said, and then I laughed because my voice sounded like it was wearing a coat it had borrowed, too big for it. I went to the counter where the generator manual lay with a post-it that said fuel in a handwriting that knew about running out of things. The post-it pointed me to a can under the sink. It was full. I was not out of fuel. Something else had made the machine stop. I pulled on my jacket and went back out. The flashlight turned my breath into an argument with steam. The generator sat quiet, but not dead. It felt like it was waiting for me to touch it before it would remember how to go. I pulled the cord again. It coughed and caught, and for a moment the drone layered over the pines like a thick brushstroke over thin ones. The lights inside came back with an eager little relief. I stood there with my fingers on the generator's skin like it was a dog who needed to feel the hand to know to stay. From the pond came a single, quiet sound like someone pressing a fingertip to the water surface and drawing a letter. The flashlight didn't reach that far. My eyes didn't either. The pines were louder out here, unfiltered by the house. Their whisper gathered, and surges made my jacket shiver against me. And in that whispering, the same phrase turned again. The same shape, a little more sure. Not hello, not exactly. More like halo, a breath around a vowel that didn't want to be named. When the generator died the second time, it died under my hand, a shiver, and then an apology in the frame. It didn't sputter. It stopped, like a conversation ending mid-sentence because someone had lifted their finger to their lips. I stood with the dead machine and a flashlight and felt the dark attend to me in a way I could not afford. I waited a long minute to see if it would restart by itself. It didn't. The pines breathed over me and made the sound of pages turning in a book my life wasn't in. When I went back inside, the battery display had given up. The stove made ticking sounds like the last words of heat. I calculated how much I cared about power versus how much I wanted to be someone who didn't break out in hives when an appliance didn't cooperate. Courage looks like competence when you're alone. I wanted that look for myself. So I went to bed in the dark and told myself to hum. I don't sing. I'm the person who mouths in group photos and choir concerts. But I made a sound in my throat, low and steady, the way my therapist had suggested in a session where nothing else worked. She'd said humming could hijack the vagus nerve and convince the body the world was not a tiger. I hummed like I was the one convincing. The pines hummed back, not in harmony, not a duet, nothing that pretty, more like an echo with politics. I would hold a note, and the wind would collect itself and push through the needles, and at the end of its push, something would add a little hook in a place that wasn't at the end of my hum. It was like I'd hummed in a language I didn't speak, and someone was correcting my grammar. When I stopped, the wind kept going for a few cycles, doing both halves, the long breath, and then the little line, as if showing me how it was done. And then it fell back into the anonymous stretch, where sound is an instruction, just weather. I slept in ugly pieces. I had dreams without images, which are the worst kind, just emotions moving through a room with the lights off. Every time I woke up, I didn't know why. Every time I lay back down, the pines would be doing their one phrase like they were practicing to say a name. By morning, the generator behaved like the night had been a misunderstanding. The battery ticked slowly back into numbers that looked like math. I made coffee, and it had the flavor of a promise kept. I told myself I had made it into the normal. That's what we do. We declare truces with the part of the world that is not obliged to make sense. I didn't tell Arya about it, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted it to go away when I didn't look directly at it. I walked the path around the pond with my hands in my jacket and let the sun prove itself. The pines looked like organ pipes. They sounded like weather, that was all. Sometimes you go looking for the source of a thing, and the source is just, this is how the world is built here. Back at the cabin, a delivery person had left a box on the porch that I hadn't ordered. There was no truck sound, no tracks in the messy mud. The label said J in the same sprawling hand as the note. Inside, a string of solar fairy lights tangled like a nest, a bag of dried apples, and a second note. If the generator cuts in wind, don't coax it, turn it off. Pines take issue with it. Humming helps until they learn you. J. I read that note too many times for how short it was, looking for prank in the letters, for the shape of someone who would think this was a fun game. The paper didn't have that energy. It had the energy of advice given by someone who had already failed at following it exactly once. The second night I didn't bother with the playlist. I let the stove tell me what the room should sound like. I charged the battery as much as it would go before the sun lost interest. I set the fairy lights in a shape along the loft railing and thought, stupidly, that it made the cabin look like an invitation instead of a room. I lay on the mattress and watched the small yellow dots make a map of places that only existed because there were dots to name them. The generator didn't try to run this time. I kept my hands off it like I was respecting an allergy. The wind rose at midnight, as if waiting for a cue I couldn't hear. I listened to it work the pines the way a controlled burn works a field, low and steady and thorough. The phrase came back. I thought maybe I could record it proof to show Arya when we sat on the hood of her car later and ate gas station donuts because we didn't know how to say the other thing we were thinking. I set my phone on the loft beam and let the voice memo app spin a line. At 2:13 there was a different sound, not the pines. A knock on the porch, polite. 2 taps, then a pause, then one more. The pines caressed the cabin and the knock did not repeat. I lay very still and wished I had not used the word polite in my head. At 2:15 a new sound came, so quiet that the recorder probably didn't even notice. Fabric moving against wood. Footsteps on the porch boards, so light they could have been made by memory. If you stand on a stage long enough, you can hear the audience in the boards. It was that. The hinges on the door didn't complain because the door did not open. But the sound leaned against the door in a way sound shouldn't be able to lean. Then the pines said my name. They said it wrong. The shape was right, but the weight was off. 4 letters that could belong to a boy or a girl, a name my mother chose because she said she liked words that could be anything. The pines took it and turned the in into air, and the vowel into a screep. I do not scream. I go very still and then very specific. I went downstairs and stood with my hand on the inside handle of the door, the way you remember to hold the baby's head. I said my name into the seam where the door meets the frame. I said it the way it sounds when you're sure. The wind took the first syllable and stretched it. It gave the second syllable back to me with an added piece like a tiny claw. HNN. You're not supposed to bargain with weather. I bargained anyway. You can have the night, I said. I'll be gone in the morning. The pines made the sound of a library when you say something too loud and everyone acts like it's fine. We all forgive you. You didn't know. A rush, and then a pause full of very small movements. In that pause, the door pressed against my hand just once, like someone had leaned their forehead to it from the other side. The pressure was light. I could have missed it. I didn't. I didn't sleep. The fairy lights stayed on as a ridiculous argument with the dark. The recorder caught 4 hours of wind that could pass for normal and 3 minutes of something that was not. When I listened in the morning, the timestamps for 2:13, 2:18 had a shape like a waveform that had made a decision. The pines in the recording didn't sound like a forest. They sounded like someone playing a tape of a forest and talking very softly behind it. I left in full sun because courage and cowardice are the same color at checkout time. I unpacked the car from the cabin and packed it into the car with the practice choreography of someone who has moved apartments 4 times in 6 years. I looked at the note and wrote on the back of it with the stub of pencil from the cupboard. Worked. Humming. G is touchy. Thanks for the apples. H. I slid it under the generator's little roof because that's where I would find it if I were me. The drive out hugged the pond, then a curve where the pines leaned in so close that daylight had to duck. When I hit the first patch of road where my phone decided to be alive again, it flinched with 10 notifications and then I got a call. My mother. I let it ring. She called again because she's old school and believes in repetition. I answered. Hey. She sighed in relief, like a song whose chorus had just arrived. Honey, thank God, I had the worst dream last night. I was walking in woods, and she made a sound like someone stepping carefully when the ice on the steps looks honest and isn't. I could hear you, but I couldn't see you. The trees kept saying your name. She laughed like we laugh when we know we sound superstitious, which is to say bravely. Your grandmother used to say pines gossip. Isn't that silly? It is, I said. I made my voice a room with good lighting in it. I'm fine, heading home. She told me about a stray cat she was feeding. I told her about the apples. We said the words we say to each other when we don't want to put the other person's fear into bones. When the call ended, the car felt bigger. I turned the radio on, not because I wanted music, but because I wanted to test what kind of company sound could be. It sounded like a person who knew several songs and refused to sing them all the way through. I laughed at nothing. I said my name to keep in mind. I didn't sleep well that week. Back in my apartment, the city noises flexed and unflexed like a creature deciding what size to be, but now there was a different layer under them. If I sat very still and turned my head just so, if the refrigerator and the elevator and the neighbor with the trumpet kept quiet for one ungenerous minute, I could hear something like leaves in a breeze that was not currently happening, an after-image sound. My therapist would have said my hearing had learned to expect the forest and was layering it over the absence. I started humming when the kettle clicked. I started humming when the bathroom fan turned off. Humming in the laundry room. Humming in the stairwell. It looked like I was being nice to myself. It felt like a password. A week later, a small package arrived with the same sprawling J on the label. Inside, a coil of wire and a card that said, "For when it's not wind. No return address, no instructions." The coil had weight like seriousness. I put it under the sink because that felt like I was doing something about it. That night there was a thunderstorm. The city did what cities do with weather. It made it into an event. Sirens tuned up. People filmed the sky as if it might do a trick. The lights flickered, and then the building's generator took over with a smoothness I felt in my teeth. The hum filled the hall and made the doors vibrate gently in their frames, and I loved it for that. At 2:13, because of course the power fluttered and hiccuped, the generator paused like a talk show host after a joke. In the brief pocket between hums, I heard something lean in at my window. Not a knock, not exactly. More like a person learning the piano and pressing the heel of their hand to the keys to feel the whole chord at once. I lay there with the covers pulled up like armor and felt how small a room can be. I swallowed. I said my name into the dark because that had become a thing I did. The air took it and gave it back with the same curious error, the claw on the vowel. The radiator ticked in surprise. The storm made the glass argue with its own strength. Then the pines inside the storm said halo, not hello, and not Hannah, and not anything that belonged to me exactly. They said it the way you say a word that you don't know is a word. And then they said it again, closer, the way you get closer to a mirror to see if the thing on your face is your face or a trick of the light. I reached up to the headboard and found the small habit I'd built, my hum. It came out low and steady and made the bed feel like a boat. The storm turned it over and over like laundry. The sound at the window paused, and then this I am sure of, hummed back, off by a note, like someone singing a song to you that they wrote and can't remember how it goes. In the morning, the street was a slurry of tree litter and last night's promises. On my door was an envelope I would have missed if I didn't check the peephole by reflex every time. Inside, a single pine needle and a tiny strip of masking tape with J's sprawling letters. They like you. Keep it small. Don't teach them your words. Don't teach them your door. There are smarter choices than the one I made. Modify your lease. Install double windows. Move to the middle of a floor where wind is a rumor. Instead, I bought a little camp battery and a cheap radio that could pick up weather. I learned the sound the generator makes when it's about to hand over its job. I turned those fairy lights into a habit. Every night, I plug them in, even though it's dumb. Every night, I let them declare their little treaty with the dark. I keep the coil of wire under the sink like a talisman I don't believe in. Sometimes, rarely, but not never, the city goes very quiet. A holiday morning. A snow that makes people forgive themselves. In those pockets, the tone in my head goes from line to curve. The pines we don't have here get in. The air holds its breath with me and waits. So I hum. I hum like someone practicing a password they're not sure belongs to them. The sound moves through the room and back. It comes home with a different weight. It puts its forehead against the door, gently, and then remembers itself and goes away. I have not been back to the cabin. I don't know if J is a person or a practice you become when you live in a place long enough to agree to its rules. I know this. The generator dies when the wind wants it to. The pines whisper when you're sure you're thinking. They repeat your name wrong at first, then right, then they stop saying it altogether because they know you'll say it for them. The world is full of lungs that are not ours. And sometimes, if you hum, they hum back not because they love you, not because they want you, but because everything that breathes likes to find its own sound, echoed. That's the best I can do to tell you this without teaching anything the wrong words. If you go for your own reasons. Bring tea, bring a coat you trust. Bring a voice that sounds like yours when you say your name. When the wind learns you, keep it small. When it presses its forehead to the door, stand where you know, not that, hum. Story 3. The Snowfall Divide. If you watch the footage, it looks like I went to the mountain alone. Every clip, every selfie, every check-in, every skit idea we recorded on the first night for the vlog, just me, laughing at my own jokes, lugging the gear by myself, clinking one glass against empty air. If you didn't know, you'd think I was the saddest content creator on earth, trying to cut a duo channel video while pretending not to be alone. But I wasn't pretending. That first night, I wasn't alone. I went up with Theo. We were going to shoot a dumb weekend series called Storm Shack. Two best friends snowed in, cooking, games, cabin lore, a ghost story every night. The storm was the hook. The rental listing promised a historic snowfall event, and we wanted the thumbnail. Theo had the better scream, and a face that split into joyful pieces when they laughed. Our audience loved them. Half the comments were, "Protect Theo at all costs." Half were shipping jokes. We laughed at those, but not in front of the camera. Nothing ruins a horror bit like clarifying the relationship. We got to the cabin around dusk. Pines shouldered the house like bouncers. The roofline had that squint that old cabins get. The porch sagged like it knew more about winters than we did. You could feel the mountains in your bones from the driveway. The wind had a texture to it, grainy, like an old TV turned to a dead channel. "Perfect," Theo said, like the wind could hear and would be flattered. They kicked the snow off their boots and waved me back into frame. "Okay, start from the sign again. Smile like you've never feared frostbite." We filmed the intro twice. In the second take, I nailed the joke about the cabin's name, Pine Hollow. I called it Pine Swallow, like it would swallow us whole, and we bumped shoulders on the punchline. Theo did this tiny hand flick toward the lens to mark the moment, our editing habit. The lens would catch the flick and we'd know where to cut. On my camera roll, the flick is there. My shoulder isn't. Inside, the place was one room and a loft, 2 mattresses up top, 1 couch below. Stone fireplace. An old radio shoved behind wood piles like a hideous but beloved family pet. Thermostat that was just a dial. A broom with so much personality I filmed it and called it Old Man Winter. The Wi-Fi was a rumor from the city. The listing said no service during weather events. The storm was the event. We dragged firewood in and set the tripod up by the window where the snow would build, handy for time-lapse. Theo claimed the loft mattress by throwing their hat on it. They did the thing where they sprawled like a starfish and shouted, "Mine," in a voice that would have been annoying from anyone else. It was just Theo. Familiata's breath. I made chili. We filmed them pretending to cry into the onions. They kept looking up at the lens like a kid peeking at a teacher to make sure the test is still a joke. After we ate, we recorded the first campfire story in front of the fireplace, because ambience matters more than accuracy. I told one about a guy who goes winter camping and wakes up to find his boot prints circling the tent. Theo did the heavy breathing behind the camera. We kept it tight and stupid. It felt good, small, controllable, harmless, scary. When it started to snow for real, it didn't look real. The flakes were huge, cottony. The porch light turned each one into its own little planet. The wind went from a hum to a wordless shout. Theo stood with their forehead against the window like a kid at an aquarium. "It's eating the world," they said with awe that tugged at something in me I don't like to name. We set a phone on the sill for a time-lapse we'd compile later into a hypnotic snowfall wall. We took one group selfie on the couch with our mugs and the kind of smile you only get when you believe tomorrow will look like you planned it. On my phone now, the couch selfie is me, smiling at the camera, my arms slung across air. At some point, you stop noticing being happy. You only notice later, in comparison. I didn't notice anything wrong until midnight, when the lights flickered. Twice, quick, then steady. "Generator?" I said, pointing at the ceiling like the ceiling had answers. "Probably on a battery," Theo said. They'd grown up in a house where the power went whenever the sky whined. Blonde at the ends, from a summer that never admitted it ended. Theo always knew what to do with the practical stuff. They reached for the flashlight we'd tossed onto the table by the door. "I'll check the breaker." They were halfway there when their hand stopped. Not their feet, not a body freeze, just their hand, hovering over the flashlight in the beam of the lamp like it had been pressed into an invisible handprint. The skin across the back of it jumped. Theo's mouth quirked into a shape I didn't know they had. "Static," they said, and laughed too loud. "Ow. Whatever. I forgot it in the way you forget a small glitch when you're trying to enjoy something. The lights held. We rolled dice for a dumb game. We filmed a 2-minute short where Theo whispered into the floorboards and the floor whispered back. Any horror person knows you don't invite the dark to play. We were careful with our invitations. The dark didn't feel like it needed one. We went to bed late. Theo clumped up the ladder and swore when they hit their shin. I flopped down on the downstairs mattress and cocooned. The wind pressed against the cabin like a hand on a drum. The fire turned to coals and whispered in dying wood language. The last thing I remember clearly from that night is hearing Theo call my name softly from the loft. Maya? A question in it. You awake? I wasn't, but I said I was. That's friendship. I said, what? Like a promise. They were quiet a long time. Then, you hear that? I listened. Wind. The kind of wind that makes the house argue with its nails. On top of it, a thin, dry sound. Not scratching exactly, not rattling. More like a whisper recorded on a broken mic sibilant. Too bright, coming from everywhere. It rose and fell with the gusts. If you lived here long enough, you'd ignore it. If you didn't, you'd give it a name to feel you owned it. The snow, I said. Theo made a noise like they didn't agree, but were choosing not to. I woke to my name again, only it was the morning voice version, and the cabin was all white on white. Total whiteout at the window, the kind where distance stops being measurable. The world had been erased down to the size of the room. Look, Theo said. They were holding my phone at an angle no selfie should be held, chin tucked, eyes careful. Their fingers trembled just the language my body understood without translation. On the screen, the loft. Theo's legs crossed on the mattress. My face poking up over the ladder, hair wrecked. Theo panned the camera to the big mirror across from the ladder. The mirror showed the mattress, the ladder, my face. It did not show Theo. New glitch, I said. Love that. We've got a haunted filter. Theo tried to smile and couldn't pull it off. Look again. They flipped to the time lapse. Last night's snowfall, sped by light, becoming curtain, becoming wall. In the reflection on the window, a silhouette moved me, I think, crossing in front of the glass, pacing. Where Theo would have been, there was nothing, not even a distortion. The space stayed empty, like someone had erased a person with a tool that respected the background. We filmed for 2 hours, Theo said. I pressed record. I remember pressing record. I checked the framing. I remember sitting down next to you. They laughed. It sounded like a new voice trying out their mouth. I guess I didn't. We tested it. The stairs creaked when Theo climbed. My hand found their shoulder. The shoulder was there, warm, solid. They pushed me, playfully, and I stumbled. They breathed. I heard it. I set the phone to record, and they stood in front of it, waving. When we played it back, the waving was mine alone. The phone focused on the wall behind where Theo should have been, and refused to admit it had ever seen a person. Okay, I said. New fun game. You're a vampire. God, I wish, Theo said. Think of the brand deals. The storm swallowed the day. It was like being trapped inside a single color. We made tea and jokes and more tests that didn't soothe anything. We tried my phone, their phone, the DSLR. The old radio's knob turned until only static remained, and even the static seemed to thin around Theo's space. We discovered rules. Mirrors showed them. Eyes showed them. Cameras, any lens, didn't. Theo could leave a dent in the mattress that the lens saw flatten. They could fog glass. The fog only filmed as random breath against a pane. We ate together and sat too close and pretended we weren't choosing to move like that. We filmed the stove door for comfort. The gut red fire, the hiss in the iron. Tell me I'm here, Theo said once. You're here. They nodded like a priest had absolved them and then flinched like something invisible had brushed past. I flinched too. Reflex. The cabin made a small thunk near the door as if a body had leaned there and changed its mind. Around noon, we tried to shovel a path to the truck. We barely made it 3 feet off the porch before the wind made enemies of our lungs. The snow came like a system, not a weather. It shocked the skin even through coat and scarf. We roped ourselves together like idiots in a movie about idiots who die roped together. The lens on the DSLR fogged and threw the world into soft shapes. We went back inside with feelingless fingers and a film of ice on the rope that we didn't remember forming. We made more tea. We cleaned as if that could tidy the air. The white beyond the glass pulsed like a living thing considering a new shape. Theo leaned their head on my shoulder and didn't move for a long time. I held still, like a hand holds a bird. As afternoon turned into whatever comes before night in a storm, We reviewed the morning's footage like we were doing an autopsy. We noticed things we'd missed. In one shot, I'm by the window, counting seconds between gusts. There's a depression in the cushion next to me, like someone sat. The depression forms and stays, but the lens sees nothing settle it. In another, the rope we'd tied to each other is tied to me, and then disappears into air, and then moves as if yanked, and I lurch, and my hand goes up to grab a hand you can't see. There's a moment in the time-lapse where my head turns sharply to the side, and my mouth opens like someone said my name right into it. Theo's name isn't on the soundtrack, neither is mine. The sun failed to arrive. Night takes advantage of storms. It comes early and pretends it was always supposed to. The power dropped for real. The room went black in a way that felt personal. We found flashlights and made a careful island of light, unwrapping it like something that might explode if startled. There's a battery, Theo said. It should. The cabin denied them by staying dark. The old radio, fully dead earlier, gave a single, small gasp and then turned its face away. We built the fire up like the cavemen whose bones we had borrowed. The flames did the ancient dance that should be comforting and wasn't. In the flicker, the walls seemed to move, breathing small. The ceiling learned a new creak. A draft wrote a sentence around my ankles. That's when we heard the voice. Not the wind voice, not the cabin language. A human voice, outside, close to the door, just on the other side of the wood. "Help," it said. A man's voice, young, but the tone had snow in it, the vowels stiff with cold. "Can anyone open, please?" We looked at each other with every feeling in that look, and then everything past fear turned toward the sound like a plant turns to light. I went for the door. Theo's hand wrapped my wrist, warm. "Wait," they whispered, the word of fog that filmed and died. What if it's a person, I said, because the other half was a cliff I didn't want to stand on. We unbolted. The wind hit the door like a body. I leaned into it. The rope burned from earlier sang back up in my skin. The white beyond held no shapes, and then clothes the color of a jacket, the dark of hair crusted with ice. A face. He was maybe 22. Blue-lipped, eyes red-rimmed, the bloodless look of a person whose body is throwing a protest. He stumbled, and we pulled, and the world telescoped down to his weight between ours. Snow came in with him and turned into water that shocked the floorboards. He collapsed near the fire and made a sound that wasn't a word. I knelt. Theo did too. He saw me. He didn't see Theo. His gaze slid past her face like we were playing a game where you pretend you can't see the person, only it wasn't a game. He blinked slow. "Thank you," he said to me, and only me, and then coughed up a sound that had texture. "What happened?" I asked, because that is what you ask when you're trying to restore the script. He put his hands out to the fire and took the heat like he believed it. "Truck," he said. Slid. I tried to walk. The white kept moving. He swallowed. His throat worked like a clock swallowing seconds. "You live here?" "Renting," I said, and we both laughed wrong. I handed him tea, and he sipped it like a person from a brochure, like the photo where the model takes a pretend sip. Theo wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and tucked it as if the blanket might otherwise apologize and slide off. "What's your name?" I said. He told me. I told him mine. His gaze, when it touched my face, moved like a person finding an address and then remembering it. When I introduced Theo, his look skittered like an insect over glass. It tried to land and had nowhere to. "Are you hurt?" Theo asked him, and he turned to me, waiting for me to translate. "Any injuries?" I said. He shook his head. The fire put a little color back into him like paint finding a canvas. I told myself this was our one good thing to outweigh the awful. I told myself stories about fate and timing and kindness. I handed him the mug and watched steam orbit his face like a satellite. The phone on the sill chimed a low battery warning because of course it did. I got up to plug it into the little backup pack we'd brought. When I turned back, the man was looking at the rope that hung off the table, the one we tied between us earlier, and he had the face of someone seeing an optical illusion. 2 ends of rope, 1 body. He didn't say anything. He just watched the rope lift and move in air and then settle. "Storm's supposed to last through tomorrow," I said, pretending nothing was strange. "You can crash in the loft. We'll make it safe." He flicked his eyes up at the loft, then back at my mouth, like he was reading a language on it. "I should go," he said. "You should not," Theo said too loud. He flinched, not from the volume, from the way the sound came from nothing. He looked at me as if I'd thrown my voice. He was going to leave. The thought of opening the door again felt like putting my face against a train. "The stairs are dangerous anyway," I said, short breath, brittle voice. "Stay downstairs. We'll take the loft." He nodded, slow, unsure if he was agreeing to the right person. He lay down near the fire like animals do when they are hurt and know what the ground does for pain. Theo and I went upstairs, leaving the rope dangling. I had the thought, stupid and feral, that if I tied myself to Theo again, the world would have to show us both. We didn't sleep. We watched the white at the window own the night. I heard the newcomers breathing, ragged, then evening out. At some point, the wind dropped enough that the silence hurt. I lay there thinking of how lenses like to lie and how there are some kinds of truth you can only see with an eye. I woke to the sound of the front door opening, not the latch, not the click. The open, the rubber gasket sigh, the felt thud of air that's had a wall removed. I sat up so fast the world staggered. "Theo," I hissed. Theo was already up. We went to the ladder, to the loft's edge. The man stood at the door with the blanket around his shoulders, a figure of someone leaving. He had one hand on the knob, the other letting the wind lick his fingers like a dog. He turned his head like he'd heard his name in a voice he recognized, not from me. "Hey," I said. "Hey, what are you doing?" He didn't look up. He stepped out into the white. I don't remember the ladder. My legs found the floor and the floor found me back. I grabbed the rope, tied it to the stair post, tied it around my waist in a knot my dad taught me. Theo did the same to the other end, like we'd done earlier without thinking, but their hands were useless against the knot. On the film, they don't exist. In life, their fingers burned and moved and saved me. We plunged into the white. The world outside the door had no distance. I could not tell where my hands ended and the air began, except for the cold. The cold drew lines around each finger and made them letters that spelled pain. The rope tugged with the wind. The wind tugged with purpose. The snow had a surface that gave and then resisted like flesh. "Hey," I shouted. "Hey." My voice turned to dust and blew away. I saw a shape. I think I saw a shape. Shadows will trick you out there. They catalog your fears and try them on. He was 10 feet away, or 30 inches, or in another county. He walked as if he were following a path only he could see. Theo's hand grabbed mine, solid, proof, and then the rope yanked. Not a gust, a force, like an answer. It pulled hard enough that I gasped and stumbled and fell to my knees, and the snow came up to greet me like a pillow. The man's shape stuttered and blurred and was suddenly farther because my brain needed it to make sense of how he could be leaving me. "Don't," Theo said. I think they said it. Their voice sounded like a sound beneath another sound, like a radio station you only get when the storm is kind. We moved, we fought. The rope burned a track into my coat at the waist and warm met skin and turned into the kind of cold that belongs to no season. I reached for him. He didn't turn. He stepped forward and down into something that shouldn't have been there. Not that close to the porch. Not a drift. Not a hole. A shape of absence cut into the white. The snow folded. He went with it like someone recalled by a word. The rope went slack. The slack told me everything. I screamed then. The sound went nowhere. It broke right by my face and fell. Theo's fingers dug crescents in my wrist. I could feel their nails. The white took the skin from my knuckles and I didn't notice. We hauled ourselves back by rope measure. The porch felt like a different country. We fell inside. The door shut as if it had help. I turned and put my back to it and slid down, and the world slid with me. Theo stood with their hands on their knees, panting like the air was too thin. We looked at each other like enemies look when they realize they've both been fighting the wrong war. Then we were moving together, inventorying what was left like we could control it that way. We played back the footage because of course we did. Every disaster wants a record. The recording shows me running into the white with a rope cinched around my waist and tied to the stair post and the other end attached to nothing. It shows me pulled sideways and falling and flailing at air. It shows me at the door afterward, bleeding from a hand that apparently found a way to bleed itself. It shows the interior as a set, complete with an empty blanket no one used and a door no one opened. Later, at the table, I tried to write all this down like a scientist. The thing that got me was the timestamps. When I synced the phone and the DSLR, the footage we took together didn't line up. The second stretching between my words and the pauses where Theo spoke in the room, the camera shaved those pauses away. It saw a different conversation. My questions to silence, my answers to my own answers. It was like the storm was busy editing us in real time to fit a narrative where there was only one. Theo went quiet. Quiet from Theo is louder than noise from anyone else. I watched the quiet on them like bruises coming up. They stood by the mirror and looked at themselves the way you look at a person who owes you money. Their breath fogged the glass. They wrote, "I am here" in it. The letters looked like a child begging a teacher to see the work. The letters filmed. The camera saw them. When we played the clip, the writing looked like it made itself. "Okay," I whispered. "We wait. We survive the night. We go when it's light. You're thinking like there's going to be a light again," Theo said. And then they smiled, and then they didn't. The hours between then and morning felt rubber and sharp at once. Every noise belonged to the house. Every silence belonged to the storm. Once, a thump upstairs made my heart stop. But when I went, the loft was just blankets and a mattress that had learned Theo's shape and held it when they stood, like loyalty. The old radio on the shelf lit up once with a glow like a fake candle, and a voice came through. Not words, just the cadence of words. It was my cadence. It wasn't my voice. We took turns not sleeping. The fire learned how to die, and we taught it different. The snow whispered at the door, polite and insistent. I started to hate the mirror for how it reached and always got Theo when the camera would not. Near dawn, the hour that's not dawn but makes a promise it happened, Theo stood to stretch. They stretched like their body belonged to them, spine arching, hands braced on the table. They made a noise like a person who just remembered their body existed and liked it. Then the world knocked once, like the man had knocked, and Theo's breath frosting the window made a shape, not letters, a grief. I don't know how to tell you the next part without sounding like I made it, and you've already decided if you believe me. The white at the window pulled, not wind, pulled. The frost on the glass slid, as if gravity had changed direction. It made a shallow handprint. Theo stepped back, the chair skittering, their heels making two dark crescents in the melted snow from earlier. They said my name. Not a question, not a plea, just Maya like an anchor thrown. The mirror held them. The camera held me. I grabbed for them with both hands. They grabbed back, our fingers locked. Heat leaped. The window brightened with that weird dawn that isn't sun but some lighter form of dark. The handprint deepened. The air in the room went thin and mean. "Don't let go," Theo said. I didn't. The room squeezed. The knot at my waist without a rope in it now. We'd untied it hours ago, burned phantom pain. For 1 second, I saw us in the mirror, reflected. Me dragging, them braced, the world stretching under their feet. For 1 second, I saw the rope of air between us, a filament like spider silk, iridescent and so delicate it made my throat hurt. It wasn't in the camera. It was only in the eye. Then something gave. Maybe in me. Maybe in the house. Maybe in the snow. I went down. Hard. My shoulders smacked floor. The mirror, insulted, cracked. The crack ran from corner to center like a scar opening. The window breathed out with a sound that made my ears ring, and then the white stayed white, and the handprint faded, and the frost erased its letters. Theo was beside me. We lay there like survivors of a small explosion. We lasted until morning in body. The light, when it finally admitted itself through the clouds, took the blue out of the world and gave it a flat gray that meant travel. The wind dropped to something that felt like a person had convinced it to lower its voice. The door opened to an unfair amount of snow, but the path had somehow held, a trench we carved with our stupidity and our need. We packed badly. We didn't film. We didn't joke. Theo strapped on the pack with the DSLR. I took the stove poker because it felt heavy. The mirror looked like a person had drawn a line through its heart. We left. We made it to the truck. It was half buried, half possible. We dug with the ferocity of animals and the tenderness of people who know they aren't built for digging. The engine started like it didn't want to disappoint us. We went, sliding, swearing, praying without the prayer words. I only looked back once. The cabin sat knee-deep in a shape that could have been drift, could have been something else. The white around it had a softness like breath. The mirror flashed in the gray. I know you think the story ends there, with us in the truck, with the world slowly putting its definition back on, with the road and the snow and the sun finally showing. It doesn't. We got home. We slept. We pretended to be alive. We opened the footage to edit the episode because going back to your job is one of the ways you say to the universe, you do not get to have all of me. It's all me. Theo isn't in any of it. In the funny parts, I am funny alone. In the fear, I am afraid at my own face. In the door scene, a coat floats into the house and falls to the ground. No one wears it. In the rescue, I run into the white tied to the house and wrestle with invisible snow and scream a name into a storm that couldn't be bothered. The man in the footage, if I imagine him there, smiles, thanks me, and leaves, and never existed anywhere but in the heater of my bones. I've shown it to people because I need sanity to be something you can prove. Friends blink at the screen and then look at me too long. They ask if it's a bit. They ask if it's AI. They ask if I'm okay. No one asks about Theo because they haven't seen Theo. Theo sits on my couch next to them, and they do not turn because the camera has taken its logic and poured it into their eyes. We tried to shoot a follow-up. We set the tripod up in my living room. We sat side by side. We clapped at the same time to sync. We started to tell the story. When I played it back, it was me alone in a chair speaking into a room that was listening too hard. Theo laughed. It was a bad laugh. I'm starting to think, they said, that the world is making a choice. Maybe it can only hold one of us at a time. What does that even mean? They shook their head. They stood. They went to the window and breathed on the glass and wrote, I am here again, because you repeat rituals that don't work if they once gave you a second of feeling like they might. The letters filmed. The camera caught them. The footage shows the words appearing, and me standing behind them, like a person who has learned ventriloquism with air. We tried doctors. We tried therapists who don't do voices because voices are attention. We tried priests who don't call themselves priests. A woman in a shop with crystals said, winter takes what it wants and leaves bones for the lakes to keep. Theo said, okay. Like a person paying a bill because they do not know what else to do. Now I'm here, speaking into this. Into you. People like ghost stories because they have rules. I think this one has a rule too. The camera wants one version of the world. The snow agrees. The mirror disagrees. But the mirror is old and easily broken. We built an internet out of lenses and screens, and it remembers what it made better than it remembers the rest of us. If you watch this recording back, the live preview on my phone shows me in the chair. The front cam auto portrait has me in a plant I keep failing to water. The shadows hold still. Normal. Good. Proof. Theo is on the floor, cross-legged, out of frame by choice, because they can't watch me watch the thing erase them again. I'm gonna hit stop now, and I'm gonna hit play, and I'm going to... Oh, it's just me. It's only me, telling you a story about a storm and a friend you can't see. The plant is there, and the crack in my apartment window from last spring is there, and my mouth saying we over and over, and behind the we there's the wind from a mountain doing static. There's a pause where Theo speaks, and the camera politely eats it. Wait. Theo, the preview. The preview is empty. The live view shows the chair, the wall, the crack. Not me. Theo's hand is on my shoulder. Warm. Nails. Digging crescents. Reflexively, I flinch. I raise my phone to see myself. To prove to myself, I am saying this out loud in a body. The screen shows a chair cooling. The mic icon bobbing because a room is making sound. In the window behind the couch, the glass fogs in two breaths. One is mine, I swear it is. The other is Theo's. The camera sees the fog write, I am here. And then shakily, one. The snow started again an hour ago. City snow, not mountain. Harmless little attention seekers. The pane trembles. The wind learns a word. The lens in my hand does not know me. The mirror across the room knows too much. If you watch the footage, it looks like Theo came back from the mountain alone. If you listen, you can hear me in the room, humming so I don't fall through the white space where my face should be. Story 4. Echo frequency. I bought the radio because I wanted silence. That's the kind of logic you use when you've been living in a city too long. You tell yourself that silence is something you can import, a thing you can carry in a backpack if you bring enough batteries. The plan was simple. 30 days off-grid. No phone. No feeds. Just me, my cameras, and a shortwave receiver my dad left behind when he stopped needing hobbies. I was going to document life unfiltered, raw, honest, viral-ready. The kind of survival content people watch with a candle lit and a blanket tucked under their chin. The cabin sat 20 miles north of a ghost town that didn't know it was dead. The map called the region Hollow Range. The GPS called it unavailable. It was November when I arrived, and the world had already gone quiet in the way that makes you feel like you're trespassing. Day 1, signal check. The cabin had power, barely solar rig on the roof, small battery array, and a generator that coughed like an old smoker. I set up my gear. 2 cameras, one on a tripod inside, one GoPro strapped to my jacket, the shortwave radio on the desk by the window, a handheld recorder for narration, The place smelled like old pine and regret. I filmed an intro. Day 1 in the range. Off-grid experiment begins. No signal, no distractions, just man versus quiet. Let's see what silence actually sounds like. I smiled because that's what cameras demand. Then I turned the radio on, scanning static for anything human. I caught the usual garbage distorted music, bursts of coded numbers, distant air traffic chatter. Then, around 11 p.m., a voice broke through the snow of sound. At first, I thought it was a bleed from a nearby frequency, the way 2 channels overlap when you turn the dial too slowly. But then it said something I couldn't dismiss. "You're freezing." The words were wrapped in static, faint but unmistakable. I leaned closer. Who's this? A pause. A crackle. Then, through the fuzz, "Turn off the light." I froze. The cabin had one lamp on, the only warm spot in a room made of shadows. My hand hovered over the switch. The voice said it again, clearer this time, my own voice. Day 3. You'd think hearing yourself through a radio would be proof of a loop, an artifact, something explainable. But I'd replayed the recording on my handheld mic. It wasn't feedback. It was like someone had taken a voice print of me and was broadcasting it from somewhere deep in the static, a few seconds late. The first night, I convinced myself it was exhaustion. By the second, I started talking to it. "Who are you?" I asked. "You already know." The voice didn't match perfectly. Mine was tired. His mind, but not, was weaker, distant, like someone trying to speak through frost. Every night, it came through at a different frequency. I started logging them. Day 1, 8.31 megahertz. Day 2, 7.88 megahertz. Day 3, 7.41 megahertz. Descending, like a countdown. When I replayed the audio in the morning, the frequencies were empty, no signal, no bleed, just normal static. But at night, it always found me. Day 6, the knock. The storm hit on the 6th night. The generator quit after an hour. The battery lights dimmed to apology. Snow slapped the windows in slow motion, like a hand dragging nails down glass. The radio hissed quietly in the dark. I'd been narrating into my handheld mic just to hear my own breathing. Isolation log. Day 6. Power's low. Temperature inside is 41 Fahrenheit. I'm, holding up. I laughed, and it sounded like lying. Then, from the speaker, "Don't open the door." The voice again. Me again. I hadn't moved. The radio wasn't even tuned to anything. "There's something outside," it whispered. "If you open the door, you let it copy you." The laugh that followed wasn't human. It started as a chuckle mine, then split open into a kind of warped mimicry, like someone replaying laughter through metal lungs. I stared at the door, and that's when I heard knocking. 3 soft, polite taps. I thought it was echoing from the radio until the sound came again from the actual wood. 3 taps, then a pause, then 2 more. I grabbed the GoPro, hit record, and aimed it at the door. "Hello?" I called. Static answered through the radio. "Don't answer." Then the signal died. I stood there for minutes, holding my breath until the world felt paper thin. When I finally opened the door, there was nothing, just snow. But right there, in the snow, were 2 sets of footprints, both leading in, none leading out. Day 9, playback. I checked the camera. The footage showed me standing at the door, hand on the knob, listening. Then, a flicker like a splice in old film. For half a second, the frame doubled. 2 versions of me overlapped, one standing, one already by the door, and then impossible a third, a shadow stepping through the door's frame as I opened it. The moment the figure entered, the light changed color, everything washed into a pale gray blue, like the world lost warmth in an instant. I paused the footage, leaned close. The figure behind me wasn't transparent. It wasn't fog. It was me, wearing the same clothes, same face, same terrified eyes. I slammed the laptop shut. When I looked up, the lamp by the window was swaying slightly, as if someone had brushed past it. Day 11. Frequency shift. The storm never really stopped. The radio kept speaking. Not every night, only when the silence got deep enough to notice. "Don't sleep," it said once. "It moves when you do." "You have to bury it," it said another time. "Bury yourself." The frequencies dropped below what the dial could measure. I had to twist the knob past 0. The speaker made a low hum that I felt in my jaw more than heard. When I recorded it and played it back, slowed down, I heard whispering. Not one voice, dozens. All versions of me, overlapping. Some begging, some screaming, some whispering instructions I couldn't understand. One said my full name, my childhood nickname. No one alive uses that name. Day 14. The voice outside. I'd stopped filming. The GoPro light made me feel like prey. That night, the generator refused to start. I didn't try a third pull. I sat by the radio with a candle and waited. Snow clawed the walls. The cabin popped like it was breathing. The silence between the sounds was so heavy it had shape. Then, faintly, under the static, "Can you hear me?" I froze. It was my own voice again, but different this time. Calm, clear, no static, no distortion, like it was broadcasting from right outside the door. "Open up," it said. "It's safe now." The candle flickered, guttered. I turned toward the window. Outside, nothing but a wash of white. But in the reflection, there was movement behind me. Something human-shaped, pacing. I spun. Empty room. The radio whined with a burst of feedback so loud it made me drop the mic. Then softly, almost kindly, the voice said, "You opened the door, didn't you?" The static hissed into a low chuckle that grew until it didn't sound like laughter at all, but like wind forced through a throat that wasn't built for it. I unplugged the radio. The sound didn't stop. Day 17 transmission. I woke up to the radio already on. It was playing a recording. My recording. The handheld mic's narration, exactly as I'd said it days ago, looping back through the static. Isolation log, day 6. Power's low. Temperature inside is 41. I'm holding up. Then, my laugh. Then silence. Then, a new part. Day 17, the voice said. "If you're hearing this, don't go near the window. It's pretending to be you again." I grabbed the mic. "What are you talking about?" "You let it in." The air around me grew cold that thick, biting cold that doesn't belong inside. I could see my breath again. The window glass had frost shapes crawling across it like veins. Something moved just outside. I raised the camera with shaking hands. Through the frost, I could make out a figure in the snow. It was me. Not like a mirror image. More like a bad copy face, slightly wrong, skin too pale, mouth moving a few frames late. It was standing right by the generator. It lifted its hand and pressed its palm to the window from the outside. My hand moved on instinct, rising to meet it. For a split second, our palms matched through the glass. The temperature in the room dropped so fast the candle died. And then the figure smiled. Not my smile. Its mouth opened too wide, stretching, cracking the corners until the skin split. From that mouth came the same frequency hum as the radio low, bone deep, like an earthquake whispered. The window cracked. Just one thin line, but the sound it made went straight through me. I backed away, heart beating in my teeth. The figure stayed, watching, mouth still open. Then, without moving, it spoke in my voice. Let me finish the recording. Day 20, the second log. The cameras don't work anymore. The lenses stay black, even with power, but the recordings keep playing at night. My voice, or what's left of it, narrates things I haven't said yet. Day 21, it said last night. I made peace with it. It's easier when you stop pretending you're the original. I don't sleep much now. Every time I close my eyes, I see the cabin from outside. Snow rising around it, window glowing faintly, and someone, me, sitting inside with their back to the glass. The figure outside watches through the crack in the window, whispering something in a frequency just below sound. If I put my ear against the wall, I can hear my breathing from the other side. The radio comes on by itself. Sometimes it plays a heartbeat. Sometimes it plays footsteps in the snow. Sometimes it plays me whispering, "Please stop recording." Day 23, the final broadcast. The shortwave is transmitting on its own frequency now. I checked 0 megahertzes. Not possible. When I tune another receiver to that, it still comes through. "This is Hollow Range Station," the voice says, broadcasting for anyone left. Then silence. Then breathing. Then, "You're not alone. You never were." The recording light on the camera flashes red, even though it's unplugged. The laptop boots itself. The folder labeled Footage, Day 1 opens. All the clips have been replaced. Every thumbnail is the same me, sitting at the desk, staring into the camera with eyes that look emptied out. I hit play. The video shows me, hunched over the radio. I whisper into the mic, "If you're hearing this, you're already in the loop. The me on screen tilts its head. Blood trickles from one nostril. The eyes roll white. Then it says, "Don't check the window." The power cuts. The screen goes black. Behind me, the window cracks again. This time, the line runs all the way across. Something cold seeps in. Air that isn't air. A sound that isn't sound. And from the radio, my voice whispers, so close it might be in my ear. Switch off the recording. I reach for the mic. My hand shakes. Now, it says, "Or it'll finish without you." Recording ends. Later, the park rangers found the cabin half buried in ice. The generator was running, but the fuel line wasn't connected. Inside, a camera was still recording aimed at the radio. There was only one clip, a low hum, looping. If you isolate the sound and raise the volume past safe limits, you can hear it clearly. A voice whispering, "I'm still here." Story 5. Caretaker Hollow. I booked the place because the listing said no neighbors. It showed a single cabin with a view down a slope where the pines split and you could see a finger of lake. The description was a brag disguised as modesty. Rustic modern, perfect for solo resets, no neighbors in sight. The photos made the world look like it had given up its angles. Soft wood, soft light, soft horizons. After months of living inside other people's opinions, I wanted to hear what my thoughts sounded like when they didn't have an audience. I drove up on a Thursday in March, the shoulder season where the snow isn't gone and the spring hasn't agreed to arrive. The road was a narrow idea scratched into dirt. My playlist ran out, and I didn't put another on. The quiet felt like a dare. The cabin was exactly as advertised, one room with a loft, a porch where a person could pretend to read while thinking about their phone, a big window that turned the lake into a painting someone spent too long blending. A ceramic mug waited by the sink like I was being welcomed by the idea of a person. I set my bag down and the building received the sound like a church. There was a guest book on the counter. It was a stack of index cards held together with a fat rubber band. The top card said, in careful block letters, "Welcome to Lark Rim. Please text if you need anything. J." The edges of the cards were frayed from being read with nervous hands. People had written the kind of internet haiku you write in breezy places. So peaceful. Saw a fox perfect for our unplugged honeymoon. A few cards lower. Wind got weird but generator worked. Thanks. B. And whoever left the board game, good call and found something on the trail behind the shed. Left it in the freezer. M. I decided not to read more. I didn't want to be told what to expect. That's why I'd come. The first day felt like the first page of a notebook you plan to fill with perfect handwriting. I made pasta on the little stove. I vertical videoed a pine trunk beaded with sap and pretended I wouldn't post it. I spread my sleeping bag on the loft mattress and opened the window a crack to let in air that felt like it had never been touched. By the time the light left, the world had turned into one of those noises that sounds like silence, only because you do not have a name for all the small sounds inside it. I slept like a person who'd promised themselves they would. In the morning, the window over the sink was the bluest thing I'd ever seen. I made coffee in the ceramic mug. The quiet had acquired a small sound under it, the sound of snowmelt moving somewhere, a secret creak. My phone showed 1 bar of service if I held it against the glass and turned my head in a way that remembered middle school. A text from my mother, who uses punctuation the way a musician uses rests. "Let me know you arrived safe. Love you." I typed here and a photo of the view. 3 little dots. The dots stopped. The message stayed unsent. It felt rude to try again. I went outside to pretend to check the generator and ended up examining the porch for signs of other lives. The steps had old scratches where boots had kicked off winter. A spider the size of a freckle had committed to a corner despite the draft. Under the railing, someone had wedged a bottle cap like an offering. My breath made the air look like it was thinking. I took a photo of my boot prints because I liked how temporary they looked. That's when I saw the cabin next door. It was down the slope, angled a little away, as if it had been set there with a careful hand last night. It wasn't there yesterday. I would have seen it from the porch, from the big window, while I stood with my mug and my good intentions. It was close enough that if I shouted, someone would shout back with enough delay to make a joke about echo. Far enough to justify ignoring each other if we both agreed to pretend. Red-brown cedar boards. A roof that sloped in the opposite direction from mine. A porch with 2 chairs lined up like teeth. A metal sign over the door. Caretaker. At least that's what I thought it said. From a distance, the letters were thick, and the paint had the look of names that have been repainted without removing the old ones. A flick of nervous old city brain. Neighbors means noise, means risk, means this wasn't the deal. Then, the other voice I try to cultivate. People live. The world is not your private theater. I went back inside. The index cards itched my hand. I pulled them out, flipped past the honeymoon and the fox in the freezer note. Deeper. Caretaker suite. Ask about trails. R, and farther still, and a hand that dug a little too hard into the paper. Don't go at night if the light is on. S. I put the stack down like it might be hot. I told myself to be normal. Normal meant go on a walk, eat lunch, read. Normal meant not rearranging reality to accommodate one new noun. At noon, someone knocked. It wasn't the polite fingertip knock of packages in the city or the whole hand bang of a friend. It was 3 firm raps with something that wasn't a knuckle. A ring, maybe. A key. The sound used the wood like a drum. I stood in the middle of the room staring at the door like if I could just mend eye contact with it, no one would be on the other side. The second set of knocks came like an I'm sorry. When I opened the door, he was there. The caretaker, 60, maybe, with the kind of age that happens outside. Cheeks rough to leather, eyes that had been squinting at distances for a long time. He wore a watch with a cracked face and a red knit hat that had been washed enough times to forget it used to be redder. He carried a tin lunchbox like a kid in a black and white photograph. The lunchbox had a sticker peeling from one corner, Mother Lark. He smiled like he recognized me and then made his face into a stranger's face. You must be Hannah, he said. I am not Hannah. I told him my name. Right, he said, like he was writing it down in air. Well, welcome. I'm Jay. He tapped the crown of his hat with his knuckle. Caretaker. He said it the way people say pastor or captain, as if it were both a job and an identity he had agreed to keep. I didn't realize there was a cabin next door, I said, because this is what you say to a fact that has broken the previous day's truth. He glanced down the slope, as if checking to see if it were still there. We get moved around sometimes. He held out the lunchbox. You look like someone who forgets to eat when the air is too pretty. Sandwiches. Apples. The apples were dried, a little leathery. The sandwiches were cut on the diagonal like a promise. He wasn't looking at me when he said, You're alone? Yes. Good, he said, and then, quickly, I mean not good. Fine. People come up here to listen. Easiest way to listen is alone. If you need anything. He tipped his hat again as though showing me there was no rabbit under it. The light comes on sometimes. That's me. Leave it be after dark. It's a weather thing. Right, I said, and because my body was too used to passing interactions needing to be content, I added, Nice to meet you. He smiled with a little wince in it, like the sun had made a sharper angle, and went back down the steps with a gait that put more weight on his right leg. His footprints in the patchy snow looked like punctuation. I ate one of the sandwiches because politeness is a survival instinct where I'm from. It tasted like someone had been making the same sandwich for a long time and had perfected the ratio between the things you know and the things you hope are there. I looked out the window at the caretaker cabin until the glass started to show more of my face in the view. He went inside. The door's closing sound took a while to come back to me. That's how quiet the day was. In the afternoon, I hiked the trail behind the shed like the index cards had implied I should. And if I tell you I didn't look for anything in the freezer, you'll know I looked. There were venison steaks wrapped in paper, and a bundle that could have been a piece of pipe or a narrow bone. The cold was a teacher. I didn't touch. The hollow behind the cabins had growth in it that looked like breath. Low ferns, blackberry brambles deciding whether to be green yet, little conifers with important posture. The world held still, the way deer do when they think you haven't seen them. The lake made a sound like a person thinking. By the time I got back, the light in Jay's cabin was on. You know the look of a lamp through a window at dusk. It's a painting you make for yourself about warmth. This wasn't that. This was an industrial, high-up kind of light. Not cozy. Necessary. The kind lighting where work happens regardless of whether you want it to or not. I remembered the index card. Don't go at night if the light is on. I remembered the sandwich. I remembered that the listing said no neighbors. I tried to read. The sentences became gnarled at the ends like they had grown in hard soil. I tried to play a game with myself on my phone, in airplane mode. Dots moved, colors matched, you know the ones. The sun finished its day, and the dark sat down like it belonged to the place more than the light did. The caretaker's cabin stayed lit, a square of insistence in the slope. Around 9, I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate, not the scurry of animals. I stood up, and my blood did that thing where it gets so loud you are sure the other person can hear it through the door. Knock, 3 times. The key wrap. I opened. I said, Jay? No one there. Just the dark. Which is never just dark if you stand in it long enough. The light down the slope flicked once, as if in response, as if winking. I took one step out onto the boards, and the air clenched hard around my ribs like a hand that had learned my size. The wind came up from the hollow, and had a voice in it, pine talk, creek hum, the soft math of snow still melting somewhere. The nail heads in the porch boards made tiny clicking sounds, the way teeth do when someone is thinking. I went back inside and put the latch on the door because humans have always put sticks in front of the mouths of caves and told themselves now it's safe. I slept and dreamed the sound of a lunchbox opening. In the morning, I made a plan, like making plans helps. Go to Jay, explain that the light keeps me up. Invent a lie about migraines if necessary. Thank him again for the apples. Ask whether bears happen. Ask whether there's a trail to the lake that doesn't end in me falling into it. I put on my boots and stepped carefully down the slope. The snow was dirty where grass and needles had pushed through. The ground underneath had the caged spring feel of thaw. The closer I got to the caretaker's cabin, the more wrong its geometry looked. Not impossible, just dot incorrect in a way you feel in your teeth. The angle of the roof had changed since yesterday. The window that had been to the left of the door was to the right. The sign over the door said caretaker in a different font. Hey? I said, because I didn't want to knock in a world that had other rules around knocking. I rapped my knuckle lightly on the door frame. The opposite of yesterday's sound. The door opened. It wasn't locked. Jay? The entry smelled like metal and oranges. The room was arranged almost exactly like mine, except the angles were off by enough to make your body overcorrect when you walked. The same table, the same stove, the same mugs, the same loft ladder. A radio sat on the counter, a different model than mine, older, its dial worn smooth. The window looked uphill, toward my cabin. The light fixture overhead was a factory pendant that hummed faintly like it was thinking about whether to be on even as it was on. Jay? I said again. The bathroom door was ajar. Behind it, just a sink, a mirror, a towel hung to dry that had gone stiff in one place like salt had dried on it. The loft mattress had a dent. The sheet was tucked with the mil-spec corners of someone who'd been taught the exact way to tuck. I took a breath to call his name louder. Before the breath finished, he said, "Don't." He sat on the floor behind the table, knees up, lunchbox open on his lap. He looked like someone who had been trying to hide and then remembered he invited me. The lunchbox held tools instead of sandwiches now. Pliers, a coil of wire, a metal key bigger than a key needs to be, a rubber stamp. I thought, I know what you thought, he said gently, like he'd enjoyed my sandwich and wanted to prepare me for bad news. Don't say it out loud. Talking gives shape. I sat on the chair because I didn't want to have the conversation standing. Your light was on. Yes, he said. It turns on when I can't keep up. I shouldn't have let you see it. What is it for? Counting, mostly, he said. Sometimes labeling, sometimes not convincing. I looked at the rubber stamp in the lunchbox. It was clotted with ink. The stamp pad lay next to it like a sleeping animal. The word on the stamp, backwards, was owner. I think you have questions, he said. How long have you been here? I said, since the day I realized someone needed to be. That's not an answer. He nodded like I'd passed the first test. The cabins move, he said. They're good at it. They learn each other's approach. Some are better at pretending to be empty, some at pretending to be safe. This one, he patted the floor with the flat of his palm, pretends to be help. I made my face into disbelief because disbelief is armor. Okay. I come when it shows up, he said. Usually I have time to get people out. I wasn't fast this time. It came late. The snow confused the road. The world did its thing. Am I in danger? I was proud of how boring I made the question sound. He thought about it like he was making a menu. Yes, he said, and then added, not the kind you think. The light. The light keeps it busy. It wants work. His smile cut new lines in his cheeks. Don't we all? It would have been funny if the room didn't suddenly tip a degree toward nausea. The hum of the light sharpened. Out the window, my cabin sat where I left it, but something about its porch steps looked self-conscious. Why did you call me Hannah? I asked. He winced in real pain. It's easier if I give you another name, he said. Makes it harder for it to keep you. I got lazy with the trick. I'm sorry. It's dangerous, getting lazy. It wasn't there yesterday, I said. Your cabin. It was, but not for you. His hands were steady on the lunchbox. He picked up the stamp and then put it down again. Listen, today you pack. You go. Don't wait for sunset. I paid for the weekend, I said, because money becomes ridiculous at scale and crucial when you're scared. I can't leave because someone's porch light makes me nervous. He looked at me until the shape of my face felt like a guess. You came up here because you wanted to hear your own thoughts, he said. This place likes that. He tapped the lunchbox. It wants a person to feed it meanings. It wants a person to say who the owner is, to say who belongs where. So it builds a room with a post office and a job. It gives that person a little power and a lot of rules. Then it waits until they can't tell the difference between keeping watch and keeping it. Keeping leave, he said. And for the first time, the word sounded like a thing that weighs what it means. I stood. I wanted to be the kind of person who listened to warnings disguised as folklore. I also wanted to climb into the careful, tidy story of my weekend and refuse the new plot. One more day, I said. I'll pack now. I'll go in the morning. He opened his mouth. Closed it. He bent and lifted the big key from the box. When he handed it to me, it was heavier than it looked. It smelled like old dust and lake water. If you hear knocking after dark, he said, put this in your lock. Turn it once and don't answer. Whatever it says, it will probably say your name. My throat had become a raw place where the air rubbed. Okay, I said to end the conversation before it ended me. I almost asked about the freezer. I didn't. Back at my cabin, everything was wrong in normal ways. My hoodie on the chair looked like a person. A fly bumped the window as if wanting in. The power flickered once, reminding me what reliance is. I stuffed my things into my bag, which made the room look more like it had on the first minute, which made it feel like I had already left. Pack now, leave now, the sensible voice said. The other voice had tricks. You came for this. You forgot what you were running from down there. Stay and prove that you are not the kind of person who scares themselves. Afternoon turned into that long, late winter stretch where time makes a wide U before slipping all at once. The caretaker's light came on. It wasn't as bright as last night. It hummed more. Outside my window, the lake was a color that your phone camera always makes uglier. At 6, someone knocked. 3 times. Deliberate. The key rap. Jay? I called, because maybe this time he was the version of himself that would eat chili and say trite, wonderful things like, you got this, and it's okay to leave if it feels wrong. 1 second, a voice said that sounded like mine. My hand moved to the latch like a dog to its name. I looked down at the key Jay had given me. It lay on the counter where I'd set it like something that preferred the weight of a pocket. I picked it up and held it. It was cooler than it should have been for a thing that had been indoors all day. The knock came again. Softer. Hey, the voice said. My voice. The exact tone I use when I'm trying to make someone believe I'm fine. Can you help me with a pause? The kind of pause that knows the length of your concern. This? The key slid into the lock like it had always lived there. I turned it. There was no click, no bolt. The air in the cabin changed. The sound of wind outside thinned as if it had been told to wait. The space just inside the door felt occupied in the way space feels right before a person enters it. Open up, the voice said. It put a laugh on the end. The laugh I use in videos when I'm halfway to brittle and hoping charm will blur it. I stood with my hand on the knob and saw myself in the reflection of the big window. Blurred, mouth firm, shoulders rounded with the day. I didn't look like the wrong person. Behind me, down the slope, the caretaker's light flickered, and for one blink, the whole cabin tilted toward it. Not physically, in fact, or yes, physically. The floor under my feet felt drawn, microscopically, like tides bulged toward the moon. My mug on the counter trembled and left a wet ring where a ring hadn't been. Please, said my voice from the other side of the door, and hearing myself beg unlace something in me I will never tie correctly again. It's cold. The key weighed my palm down. My other hand rose the way hands rise to help. I set my grip to turn the knob. The lunchbox lid closing is a sound that has started happening in my head at random times, so maybe I imagined it then. What I know is that I said, out loud, no. The word wasn't strong. It was ordinary. It made a shape in the air that felt like a door being set back in its hinges. Silence. Then my voice again, a notch lower, the way you make your tone when a dog won't come. Open the door, it said. You dropped something. I have everything, I said, because I did. Suddenly I had my bag, my coat, my keys, my fear. A sound came through the wood that wasn't knocking and wasn't scratching. It was like someone pressing their forehead against the door and pushing a thought hard enough to make the grain creak. Under it, I heard my name, the version my mother uses when she's remembering the baby instead of the adult. I didn't cry. I swallowed, and the swallow sounded like crying. The light down the slope went very bright, then off, and the dark around that dark pulled in. In the window glass, my reflection's mouth moved a half-second out of sync. Behind my shoulder, something that looked like the idea of a shadow leaned forward and put its ear near the seam of the door, as if listening back. I held the key like a talisman and did not open. The night performed itself. At some point, the knocking stopped. At some point, the wind worked up a laugh and let it go. At some point, the house made the sounds houses make when they decide you are boring. I slept badly in the way a person does when their plan is to leave at first light. I left at first light. It felt wrong to not say goodbye. I walked down the slope with the big key in my pocket and frost ringing the blades of the grass like a cheap halo. The caretaker's door was ajar. The light was off. The hum was gone. Inside, the room was bare. Not like someone had left, like no one ever had. The table was a plank. The ladder was a line. The counter was a rectangle with no radio. A square of darker wood on the wall where a sign might have hung said only, "Take her," if I squinted. A note lay on the floor made of the kind of paper index cards are made of. It said, "You're early," in big, careful letters. Beneath it, the lunchbox, closed. When I picked it up, it had no weight. It was empty. I set the big key on the table because that felt like a thing someone had done before me. I stepped outside and turned to look up at my cabin, already rewriting itself into the kind of story where none of this happened except inside a shaky nervous system. That's when the caretaker cabin's door moved. In a way, doors move only when there's a person on the other side deciding whether to show themselves. I didn't wait. I went. The road did that thing roads do where you realize you don't remember the drive-in. The trees were ordinary as actors out of costume. When I hit service, my phone did its pratfall dance and then spat texts. My mother's came through 3 times as if she had been sending it to the version of me that might not get it. Let me know you arrived safe. Love you. I sent her a photo of the highway. I said, on my way back, love you too. The dots came, and then they didn't, and then they did again, and produced, good, it's windy here. I put a note on your door to remember trash day. J. And then, immediately, oops, not J. Mom, sorry. Autocorrect. The city tasted like metal and noise. My apartment had left a smell out for me that it thought I'd like. On my door, a yellow sticky note. Trash day moved to Friday. J. I told myself J was my building manager, who was named Jared and who hates when we forget. I told myself that has to be what it meant, because my body did not have room for it to be anything else. I unpacked the bag and set the ceramic mug by the sink, because apparently I had stolen it without knowing. The handle had a chip I hadn't felt. I put it back on the counter because it wasn't mine, and the gesture felt like returning a library book to a shelf that isn't the right one. I sat on my couch and felt my apartment not know me for a second. Then pretend. That night, in the space between behave and sleep, someone knocked. 3 raps, deliberate. Far away, on the corner of my life, where the caretaker's cabin is not, a light hummed and decided it was on. I went to the door with my city keychain and the key J had given me, which I had not left on the table after all. I turned it in my lock and the air stopped moving like a held breath. A voice that sounded like mine said, softly, "You forgot something." This time I knew better than to answer. This time I set the lunchbox empty, light, still smelling like oranges if I thought hard enough down in front of the door. On the lid, in the oily light of the hallway bulb, seeping through the seam, a shadow spelled a word backwards, recat. I blinked, and it said caretaker again for a second, the way words do when you've stared too long at letters and taught them new tricks. I slept. I didn't dream. Or I did and forgot it on purpose. In the morning, my phone had a new message from an unlisted number with a terrible signal icon. Thanks for listening. Keep the key. No name, no punctuation. The area code belonged to nowhere. That week, I started saying hello to my door before I left, and thanks to it when I came home, and I stopped putting anything that matters on the inside handle where it could hear me. I got rid of the index cards because I think they keep a record for the wrong side. But sometimes my hand still makes the motion of rubber banding a stack into a manageable story. There's a trick to living now. When I pass a porch with a light that hums, not glows, hums, I don't look too long. When I see a cabin in a place where yesterday there wasn't one, I keep my head straight and my feet moving and my mouth closed, because names are bridges and a lot of things know how to walk. Occasionally, late, the lunchbox makes a small sound like a lid, remembering how to be opened. I ignore it. Sometimes ignoring a thing is the only prayer that doesn't sound like an invitation. I've started watching my own porch in a way I can't explain to my friends without making them look over my shoulder. The way the light falls, the way the step creaks, the way the shadow of the street lamp makes a little patch of brightness near the lock. I tell myself I'm learning to be my own caretaker. Jay said the cabins like a person to feed them meanings. I am trying to feed myself instead. I say out loud, in my apartment where sound decides what to be sometimes, this is mine. The wall doesn't argue. The door, sometimes, shifts like a person easing a sore shoulder. The lunchbox is empty when I check it. The key is heavier than it should be. The world goes on pretending it hasn't been rearranged. If I ever go back to Lark Rim, I know what I'll see from the porch with the mug in my hand. The slope, the pines, the finger of lake, and maybe a cabin that wasn't there the day before. It will have a sign over the door. It will say, caretaker with confidence. It will have 2 chairs lined up like teeth. If I'm unlucky, the light will be on. If I'm unluckier, it won't, because some nights, I think, the work is already done. If someone knocks in the dark and uses my name in the exact tone my mother uses when she finds me in the grocery store and I've forgotten to answer my phone, I'll hold the key and make the hard, ordinary word in the air that weighs what it means. No. And then I'll listen not at the door, but to the way a room sounds when it realizes it belongs to you, and I will wait with the kind of patience that has edges. Because some jobs don't end. You only hand them off to whoever knocks next with the right ring, saying their name too soon. If that's you, if you go there and the listing says no neighbors and you see a lamp where there shouldn't be one, and a cabin leans its shape into your morning like a stranger at a bus stop, saying your name like a question, don't answer, don't approach. Don't make a ceremony out of leaving. Take the apples. Leave the lunchbox closed. Keep the key. If someone on your doorstep signs a note with a single letter and a careful hand, don't be flattered. It means the world reassigns people when it needs to, and it will use your name if you offer it. You'll want to say someone should stay, someone should help, someone should count and label and convince. You will imagine yourself as the noble version of that person, because that's how stories keep us. But help here is a ladder with grease on the rungs. Counting becomes being counted. Labeling becomes becoming the label. The job is simple. Get out before the light hums like it's thinking your thoughts, before the porch learns your footsteps, before the door hums your name into the wood grain like a song. I didn't leave early. I left lucky, and every time the lunchbox lid makes that small memory sound in the dark, I practice the word again on a breath that fogs the air just enough to write it where the door can read. No.